WEFUNK. We funk.
Synopsis of this film by IMDb is, this documentary features rare footage filmed by Christopher Wallace's best friend, Damian D-Rock Butler, best friend, and interviews his closest friends and family, revealing a side of Biggie Smalls that the world never knew.
Well, I don't know about world never knew. I mean,
yeah, two issues with that synopsis is, one, I don't think at any point in this documentary Damian D-Rock was ever referred to him as his best friend.
Oh, no, I think so. I think Damian D-Rock is one of those guys as well, just like from the VH.
I think Oli was his best friend.
See, Oli was honestly interesting because you knew that he was going to die just from every time if you've ever watched a documentary before, you're like, uh-oh, yes. I got a feeling Oli's not making it fucking very far. But D-Rock is one of those guys, just like his mom, they have been in every single Biggie documentary show. Like I'd recognize Damian D-Rock on the street if I saw him, because he's like just so synonymous with being Biggie's right-hand man. And Biggie obviously was just taking all of his boys with him, and I think D-Rock was one of those guys that didn't even like fit the team as a rapper. So I was like, here, dude, you carry the can. He was the turtle of the gang, basically.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I was gonna say, like, I always pictured that like Little C's was his like right-hand man, dude. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Little C's was like actually a good enough rapper though, so he had like a purpose with the crew on stage. Like D-Rock wasn't even like a rapper. He was just like a straight up hanger outer.
He's got like a cool fucking nickname and a camera.
yeah. And I think like they talked about, and he's always talked about, but he was like doing the drug operations that was kind of funding and fueling the beginning part of Biggie's career. He was the one that was like actually in the streets, kind of taking some of Biggie's money and turning it into higher profit through drug sales, as they talked about yesterday. But
they do talk about it because it's one of my favorite, and we'll get into this in a second, but just to finish this up real fast, it's directed by Emmett Malloy, who's really kind of
real
just
quick
like
though,
Williams.
before you even get back to Emmett Malloy, the other thing that synopsis got totally wrong though, didn't know about Biggie. Isn't this the only thing that we know? Hasn't this been like the entire his whole fucking point of being famous is rapping about dealing drugs and doing all the shit that they talking about?
Exactly. One of the best Biggie quotes of all time, it was like, look, if I worked at McDonald's, I'd make raps about selling Big Macs. Like, but which is like, I think Weird Al's got that market covered. But like I was saying,
where's that documentary, by the way? Where's the Weird Al doc?
There's a fake Funny or Die trailer for a Weird Al documentary, and it's Jesse from Breaking Bad's playing Weird Al.
Okay, nice.
It's amazing. I think there's one point he's just like, I'm just too weird. It's pretty fucking solid, dude. But anyway, poor Emmett Malloy, the director, and like I was saying, kind of like Hype Williams, he's just known for directing music. He's like a music video director.
Okay,
so
I see.
This was his first, I think, dog feature film. The cast, which is really just real people, obviously, but just going to kind of throw everyone that's in there, and then me and Liam are going to talk about kind of some of the highlighters. But Damian Butler, obviously, Sean P. Diddy Combs, Violet Wallace, his mom, Little C's, Gwendolyn Wallace, his grandmother, Dave Wallace, his uncle, which we're going to get into, C. Gutta, who we'll get into, Faith Evans, Hubert Sam, Donald Harrison, Chico Del Vec, and of course Maddie C. from the Source magazine. All right,
Mr. C.
Immediately, I want to say that Maddie C was the character I was waiting for to show up in this documentary the whole time, which is like, not because I know who he is, but just like I've seen enough like rap movies to know that like this skeezy white guy who works at the fucking magazine
that Maddie C
was going to show up, dude. Yeah.
I know you were like, Mr. C.
And like, sure enough, there he was with his ponytail and was like, oh yeah, like I was doing the best unsigned rappers. I was like, I fucking like this guy. But then he's just like, he knew he was the white guy was going to show up and be like, of course I could. But he also said something too, Matty C, of just, he lived like a block and a half away from Biggie. He said they would like take a train together sometimes. And I was like, what?
Yeah. That was his in. Lived fucking 3 blocks away.
I got to say, Dave Wallace, just kind of like the unsung hero of the movie. But Reggae Uncle Dave, dude. One of the best, who's also a musician.
Now, I was kind of hoping that he took on more of like an Uncle Junebug presence in Snoop Dogg's life, or Papa Wu from Wu-Tang. Like, was he traveling to all the concerts and stuff? Like, they didn't really show him as part of the entourage as much when they showed Biggie on tour. Like, it started off with, like, you know, him getting dressed, that dramatic scene of Uncle Dave getting dressed for a night out. I was like, oh, dude, this is going to be amazing if they show him smoking blunts with fucking Biggie's friends at all these concerts. But then I don't know whatever happened to him. He got fucking left for
honestly,
Jamaica.
I don't think he honestly ever left Jamaica. I think he was just like the local town. But you know, after Biggie got big, he was like, I am Biggie Smalls. Favorite Uncle Dave.
Oh, he was cutting it up at the reggae fucking at the jukebox or whatever they call it. I forget what they call it in the stereo system, like in Jamaica. But he was killing it.
What about you, man? Who are some of the besides Christopher Wallace, Biggie? Who are some of like the good characters that stood out for you?
Well, I guess some of the things that stood out, I guess, just he unfortunately that he, you know, was succumb to a homicide because he had fucking amazing genes and would have made it forever. His grandma was 96 and looked fucking strong as hell, like looked fucking great for 96, and his mom as well.
That's
like
very
I've
true.
said, dude, if you followed Biggie's story over the last 25 years, like us, you've seen his mom. She's aged fantastic. She looked fucking amazing for a 2020 documentary, you know?
Dude, that's such a good point too, because if I hadn't like known who they were, you could have told me that the grandmother was his mom, and 100%. Like, oh yeah, no doubt, that totally tracks.
And the grandma was 96 too. It's not even like she was saying, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No, that's fucking crazy, dude.
But so that was fun. I'd say just like his other just random boys were hilarious, like D-Rock obviously, but as well fucking a C Gutta who was just obviously like fucking a stick-up artist that they had to like try to make that seem...
Well, he says it too. He's like, you know, before like we got into selling crack, he's like, we weren't really doing anything. He's like, well, I was robbing people. He was like,
and then he brings it up like every story. He's like, well, you know, I was just getting done with robbing somebody. You know me, that scary black guy from Brooklyn that robs everybody. Like,
in that kind of same vein you're talking about, Chico Del Vec was one of my favorite characters. He was the guy that like originally started like giving him like the rocks to sell, but when he's first introed in the documentary, dude, it's almost like they just told him on the spot with the cameras on like what he's going to be talking about. Because like right when it comes on, dude. He's like, I'm not going to be talking about selling crack.
No, that guy so obviously is addicted to crack. Like he was so obviously high on crack cocaine during this fucking.
But like to his intro during it too, it was kind of like that old Dave Chappelle Little John sketch where he's like, what? And then he's like, oh, actually, I have, because after they convinced him to do it, he's like, I'm not going to talk about crack. And then he was just like, I'm actually the first person that sold Biggie his crack rock. It's like, what the fuck just happened, dude? Like,
yeah. Dude, you know, can I bring up something a little bit uncomfortable, actually? A character that, to bring us down a little bit here, but what was up with Creepy Jazz Guy? Is there anything weird about Creepy Jazz Guy? And again, just in a world where I guess I know it's a different time, but in 2020, I look at any full-grown man that's voluntarily doing activities with a child as, unless he was trying to fuck Biggie's mom, is there something weird about this guy taking Biggie to the MoMA? Like, I get that he was, you know, like, just in general, if you know... If I ever tell you I'm taking out a 12-year-old because I'm trying to give back to the community, call the fucking feds, all right? Just like, it's just no fucking adult man, I think, should be doing this kind of thing with strange boys unless there's...
I would say that to us, though, is like just kind of like culturally different, where like you and I didn't really come from hard neighborhoods where you need a mentor to kind of steer you in the right direction.
Fair enough, for sure.
Like if you're like grew up like we did, and there's like an old ukulele player taking me to the MoMA, then for sure call the feds. Another thing I would say, dude,
it is just Biggie, real quick, a very sad indictment that I even am bringing that up, and of course a little bit facetious. But honestly, anytime you
I raised eyebrows immediately.
For sure. Anytime there's like an adult male voluntarily going out with a child, and you're right, dude. Hopefully it is. He saw that he had artistic talent, music talent, was a local jazz musician, was trying to show him open up his artistic expression. But it has to be a little
say
concerning.
Too that. Just kind of like, and we'll talk about like, is Biggie the GOAT? But just the way Biggie raps, he raps about everything from like, you know, his rap's a little darker to like cutting his wrist and being depressed. Or like I said, he does in rap about selling Big Macs because he sells crack. You don't think there would be a fucking fuck Donald Harrison track? Be like, yeah, he raped me when I was 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think there would definitely be.
No, for sure. Donald Harrison would have definitely been murdered a long time ago, but definitely just an interesting. And honestly, I think a super obvious alibi. He was trying to fuck Biggie's mom, which totally acceptable. You know, like I'm just like, even if we just can just go settle on that, then I give it the thumbs up. Fucking take as many trips to the MoMA as you'd like. You know, fucking. But if he wasn't trying to fuck his mom, then there was something weird with that relationship. That's all.
Well, she had
said, but I guess
Violetta. She had that great line about her about Biggie's dad, where she was just like, "Oh, he tried to trick me, that motherfucker. He said he wanted to come over and see the kid, but he only come over at night." She's like, "You think you're gonna come over here while he's sleeping? Get the fuck out!"
Yeah, Sue Ellen or whatever the fuck his name was pretty awesome, dude. That guy, gotta be honest, he was.
I'll come over. I want to see the boy. I'll come over at
see the baby.
midnight.
Yeah, 1, 2 in the morning work.
But good. Yeah, but these are just like, and kind of this would kind of bring us into the actual documentary itself. And of course, we're not going to give you a breakdown of, like, we're not going to document the.
Well, he was born in Brooklyn and went.
Yeah. Hold on to your hats, guys.
You see, Fulton Street was a lot worse than fucking St. Gates or whatever the fuck he was. But.
Yes. But I mean, I guess basically what it is, though, and kind of just give it some points, because I remember you and I talking before we watched this, and it was going to be like, oh, interesting. Is there going to be any insight on, like, his murder, or like maybe who did it and all that? And it's kind of just like, think of Biggie, you always, of course, think he's synonymous with Tupac, and you think about him getting, like, them both getting murdered and whatnot. But this, you forget so much about his younger life and his actual, like, come up, and that's why it was so great to have this movie with D-Rock having that everything filmed from, like, such a young age. And when you see him as, like, a 12-year-old and, like, you know, just a young kid rapping, like, joking around and rapping and all that stuff, it's definitely the documentary is definitely more in a positive light versus that, like, you know, Tupac doesn't really come up at all, except, like, the very necessary aspect of it. His murder is really the ending, and is even kind of a place of celebration in this.
No, that's a good point, dude. And I guess maybe even what the trailer is, the synopsis was alluding to in terms of the other side, or the life that we didn't see of Biggie. Maybe that's even what it was the positivity, because you're right, his whole music catalog is so synonymous with, obviously, the whole murder and life after death, Ready to Die, all that kind of stuff, but as well just such gritty criminal activity that you never think of Biggie as, like, a happy, positive kind of thing. So to hear about, like, a positive childhood and just to see footage of him and his boys laughing was definitely great.
I think
to
something
see.
very relevant in this movie too is that, and I think we might have even joked around this before on the show, but it's just that, you know, he died at 24, even though he looked like a fucking 40-year-old man. Fucking, he was a 24-year-old kid, and you really see that, like, in this film. Like, you really see that he's like a 24-year-old that, like, he was a fucking kid that literally became a rap success overnight, and, like, he was making money at 13, like you said, 14, like, fucking selling crack. So he was like, you know, the movie kind of makes it seem like he was like, all right, like, let me know if you're going to come me a record deal. If not, I'm already kind of like a local celebrity. You know.
No, for sure. And you're right, man. That's a very interesting part about rap in general, but they all came onto the scene when they were so young, where it's just like, you know, Mobb Deep and Snoop were like 19 and 20 years old when their debut album come out. Biggie was, you know, 20 years old, and you're right, just all of there was so much just relatable to, you know, 20-year-old kid antics going on. Like, I was joking with you, but what 23-year-old kid hasn't had the conversation with their boy about how big the blunt they just smoked was? Like, when the guy showed up, he's like, yo, you should have seen the blunt we just smoked. We took out all the tobacco from this thing and packed it in with the pen. It was awesome. Like, with the youthful exuberance of any fucking pothead 23-year-old in America, you know? And,
you just kind of saw that kind of side of him in this, where, like, he was kind of young, like, just goofy kid, like, hanging out, smoking weed with his boys.
And you're right, dude. In terms of focusing not on Tupac and the murder, but focusing on positivity, it was really super positive light. Even his, like, street life and criminal activity, it definitely talked about the drugs, And, rather, upfront that he was dealing crack and whatnot. Even that was somewhat glorified in the sense of just like, well, kids in the circumstance, gotta do what they gotta do. However, they totally brushed over any violence. Like, they never mentioned any street violence that he did, especially when in his one interview that they used, where he was talking about coming up in the drug scene, and he's just like, we was dealing drugs, then, next thing you know, everybody got murdered, and we was running the streets. It's just like, well, did you murder everybody? Like, is that what is that the fucking obvious connection between all of your music about killing rival drug dealers and you just saying that? Yeah. And now you...
Yeah, he yada over the...
100%.
There was a bunch of guys on the street, yada, now we're making a bunch of money where they used to stay.
100%. Yada over all the shit that he rapped about as well. And it's like, he didn't even yada about it. It's like, this documentary did, It's like, Biggie would have been happy to tell you about all the fucking guns and shit that he had. Like, that was, as well, like assault, various assaults and arrests and all of that kind of stuff. Like, they just never mentioned any of that, which I'm not looking for them to mention any of that,
No, exactly.
But they tried their best to make, like, a super positive Biggie Biggie
because
documentary.
You would think by watching this that literally he was just like a good guy selling crack, didn't really know what he was doing.
Yeah.
And then like before his eyes he saw murder, like his friend Oli died. He was like, all right, that's enough for me. I'm gonna become a famous rapper. It's like bullshit, dude. Like when Ready to Die was already like recorded before it was like maybe printed, he was still out there like on the streets and shit, dude. Like Puff Daddy talks about it in the movie. He was like, dude, it was definitely an issue of like, I knew he was gonna be a star, but then I would go back to my condo in New Jersey and he would go like back down to fucking Bedford Avenue.
And that's where all the thing with D-Rock came in, and like Biggie's talked about, but all of those guys in Junior Mafia, they all got through the record label like big advancements of some degree, like Little C's and all those guys, and then they would just invest it back in the streets with that guy D-Rock, and they were all making like this whole drug enterprise that was kind of being funded through music money, but then getting put into the drug business and a lot more money getting cycled back in and whatnot. So it was just like this, a literal like criminal enterprise that was going on that they fucking talked about. You know what I mean? And like Last Night didn't focus it on anywhere near as much as other places have focused on it. But Last Night, it's kind of just the point that we're trying to make is that they were really focusing on positivity and making it a pop. And even kind of just thinking about it now, it is somewhat interesting in terms of maybe when we talk later on about some other documentaries that can make, but looking back, especially in the scope of 2020's like cancel culture, a lot of rap music doesn't necessarily stand up 25 years later by subject matter and content. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of misogyny going on in Biggie Smalls and a lot of misogyny going on, you know what I mean? So, like, if you're looking to cancel the guy, you could. So it seemed like they were going out of their way to, like, let's just focus on all positive to not fucking...
The fun raps.
Yeah, exactly. Like... But
the one for the Dr. Dre and Ed Lover movie. We're gonna focus on that song a lot.
Exclusively that one.
Party and bullshit and party.
I guess my other big beef with the doc, if I can, but especially it comes from Puffy, and they, it's the Biggie documentary, and you're trying to sell Biggie as the all-time best, which I think that he is the all-time best rapper or whatever. However, they did kind of make it seem like there was no other New York rap scene going on between, like, they pretty much yada-yada'd, like you said, from Heavy D and Big Daddy Kane to Biggie Smalls. They mentioned that there was popular West Coast rap that came out in the time, obviously Dre and NWA and all that kind of stuff, but on the East Coast, the Nas Illmatic came out before Ready to Die, 36 Chambers came out before Ready to Die, like Mobb Deep had their debut EP, Sadat X, and Nadia Onyx Back the Fuck Up all came out before Ready to Die, so there was a lot of other really good East Coast artists. The fucking only guy that mentioned Nas in this whole documentary was Tupac. Like, how does nobody talk about the emerging 90s rap scene with all of his contemporaries? He made the fucking song with Method Man off of the what off of Ready to Die. He didn't mention, the whole documentary doesn't mention this fucking other group of rappers in Staten Island that are doing their thing. Well, Queens had their own scene going on. Mobb Deep and Nas, like both of Mobb Deep and Nas and Queens, both put out albums before Ready to Die. Like Queens had their whole thing going on. Brooklyn had their whole thing going on. And the documentary literally went from Heavy D to, West Coast was doing their thing, but Biggie was like, Puffy's like, I'd never heard anything like it. It's like an alien. It's like, dude, he was the best, but I mean, it's not fucking, it's not alien compared to fucking Onyx or Nas, what I mean? Like, there are other guys doing fucking similar enough rap.
That's true. I mean, I would say Biggie definitely has his own style of rap that I think he meant was just like very interesting.
But Alien? Also, can we fucking mention that Nas exists? For God's sakes. And honestly, for me, just growing up in New York, it was such like a scene. And they're kind of all so synonymous in my mind together as being like this whole emerging art form and genre all came out with these amazing artists within 2 years. To not mention any of their other existence was kind of like, dude, as a fucking 90s rap guy, Biggie was my favorite, but I mean, fuck,
He did talk about the other West Coast rappers a lot, and you're right. He didn't bring it up East Coast. I think that was he did that on purpose, obviously, to like show like that Biggie was going to take on the West Coast rappers. And I'd say that too, that like the reason you would bring that up is that I think you're right. Like Nas, amazing, but I think at that time though, the West Coast rap that was coming out was definitely more commercially successful.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Like the fucking Snoop Dogg album, Chronic, was fucking amazing. Snoop Dogg's fucking Doggy Style.
And maybe Puffy as just a douchey record exec, that's all he ever did here. Because you're right. That's what commercially successful, the first ever.
Because those weren't just videos getting played on like, those weren't videos just getting played on MTV Raps. Like those are getting played on the general fucking circulation of
they
MTV.
Were like the #1 albums of the year. Snoop Dogg and Dre were fucking huge crossover stars.
So
and
I
even
think
in
that
East
aspect,
Coast, they kind of didn't mention, but the whole Def Jam scene with Beastie Boys and Run DMC was a different style of East Coast rap that was mainstream successful. And I kind of talked about and you can check it on YouTube, this March 9th, Notorious D.A.Y., but I talk about how, like I said, Biggie's death was the death of the 90s, like the whole edgy artistic scene that went on in the 90s, and
absolutely.
My point was that I talked about in that, but is that was kind of like a weird thing because I don't think that Biggie and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, like that music wasn't necessarily meant to be mainstream successful. It was just so good that it became mainstream. But like Biggie, like gangster rap was akin to like punk rock music. You know what I mean? It was like antisocial, counterculture, not made for the mainstream. You know what I mean? Where, but they were so fucking good they couldn't be overlooked and became mainstream, and then that caused somewhat of a problem because now the #1 artists are Dr. Dre and Biggie, and something's got to give in the culture, But
very true. Well, I think another reason that like Biggie though did get such a got up to that popular MTV kind of play is Puff Daddy. To give Puff Daddy props. Puff Daddy did a great job, and I guess I'll say Bradley Cooper, spoiler alert if you haven't been paying attention, but Biggie dies at the end of this one. But I think Puff Daddy did a great job of like really selling Biggie after he died. Because I'm pretty sure that like Life After Death came out like right after he died, or maybe right before he died. But that Biggie, can't you see? That video fucking was out after he died. You know what I mean? It has that whole Sublime feel of like when Sublime was a huge album after Bradley Noel died. I think Puff Daddy like really sold that fucking Life After Death album very well in like a fucking post-Biggie world. And then also, let's not forget that fucking cheesy video with him and Faith Evans fucking...
Every breath you take.
And then the MTV award show where Sting actually sang it with them.
Oh, God, I forgot about the live Sting on piano with Puffy. Oh, dude, that was such a fucking bummer.
It was like a public fucking, like it was like a PR win for Puff Daddy. I remember like one of the craziest theories I ever heard was some kid in high school was like, fucking Puff Daddy had Biggie killed. I'm like, why would you say that?
I would have believed it, bro.
He was like, dude, look how famous and popular Puff Daddy is after that. Puff Daddy was never a rapper. Then he had a 2-disc rap album that came out like after Biggie died. Dude.
And Biggie, like we said, probably would have ended up getting arrested very soon for doing something horrible. You know what I mean? So it's like Puffy might have saw the fucking no, but it's a.
But
it's
like
a
Mo
great,
Money,
like,
Mo Problems. You would think
problem,
of Mo Money, Mo Problems, like that cheesy fucking hit. that's a Biggie song technically, but you would definitely think of it as like a Puff Daddy and Mace fucking song.
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, for sure.
With them jumping around those red and yellow jumpsuits and shit.
They kind of finally admitted on the thing yesterday, on the documentary, but they finally admitted that Biggie obviously wrote all of the lyrics for those other bozos, which any Biggie fan obviously knew. That it's like, man, Lil' Kim really wrote this amazing album that one time and then never did anything again. No, it was obviously Biggie was writing all the lyrics, but.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Faith Evans makes that great point too. She's like, and kind of like what you were saying too, like how their focus was just recirculating the money in the street and making that empire. She was like, dude, if any of them like really would have like taken the time out, she's like, Biggie would have made any of them like a gold record, dude. All of them were talented. All of them were talented enough, and with a fucking lyricist and like, mentor. Sure. I didn't want to say because they're all the same age, but like any of them could have been like breakout fucking.
Yeah. No, I mean, Lil C's...
Dude, that Lil C song, I still fucking sing that song all the time. I know you see me on the radio. True. You hear me on the stereo. True.
And honestly, Lil' Kim Hardcore is a fucking great album, dude. Really good. Like, Hardcore is a great title because it's like brutally offensive, vicious lyrics about just like sexual graphic nature.
Lil' Kim fucking paved kind of that way. Like, with no Lil' Kim, there would have been no fucking Trina or Foxy Brown or fucking Cardi B or any of that shit. Lil' Kim, I would say, is like the first person I can think of that like came out of that hardcore like fucking just female rap.
Yeah. I mean, no offense to the Lady of Rage, but Lil' Kim fucking did it the best, But again, she had Biggie writing all of the stuff, so.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in the movie too, they like the fake movie, like the actor one. There's a scene where he's like in bed with Lil' Kim, and she's like, "Oh, let me kick a rap for you," and he was just like, "Nobody wants to hear that." So like she does it really good. He's like, no. Make raps about like sucking dick and shit. Like no one wants to hear about you out the street. That's men shit. And I was like, yeah, fucking right, dude.
I know, seriously. But I guess ultimately though, other than that, my other big kind of, I guess, complaint sort of, feeling about the documentary or just surprise like we were talking about, but I was kind of expecting a more Netflix style shocking revelations and fucking groundbreaking information that were coming out. Although, like I said, we kind of know, like they had pretty much pinpointed the person who they thought killed Biggie, and then that person died, got shot by somebody else, or you know what I mean, but years and years ago. So there's not really much much more to look into other than that, I suppose. But I kind of thought they were gonna like put all of that information into a tidy bow with like definitive fucking precision on all the info and leave no questions unturned. I'm kind of, like you said, really happy that they didn't, because all in all, it was just a much more positive, fun documentary.
It was, dude.
But
and again, it was. I'm with you on that. Like, having finished watching it, I think that initially was a complaint of mine, but kind of like you're saying, it was nice to see a documentary or just any kind of real story about Biggie where like the murder and the Tupac beef wasn't the central story. Like, it was nice to see fucking how he came up, dude, and like again, like how he was just like a fucking kid.
He went to the MoMA with the jazz artist. I would have never. Who would have thunk? Like honestly, if you listen to his albums, you'd think that he like fucking was getting coal for Christmas and never had a fucking smile in his life. You know what I mean? Like that's
he was going to Jamaica. He was going to Jamaica every summer.
Like what the fuck? But his art was such a different fucking portrayal, of just like raw terror that was going on, that it was great to see that Biggie had like a fucking, half a decent life,
Big F! WEFUNK. We funk.